Hi, my name is Doug Vogt from the Dinehole Foundation. This is part 3 of Series 9 on Joseph, and this is probably the most important one of the series. This is not religion, this is history, at least digging out what the real history is from the code systems that Moses put in. For those who are not religious at all or atheists, the real question here is, how much free will do we really have? And I'm going to go into that at the very end of this video. And it's really the question for all of us that we have to answer. And you'll understand what I mean once you see this whole thing play out. So this video is going to handle which Pharaoh was the one who enslaved 11 of the 12 tribes, why 11 of the 12 tribes went into slavery. It's what Joseph had done. How Joseph covered up where he put the gold and silver, the final location, which was, of course, Mount Sinai, the cave, the real family tree of the Levites and the Ephraimites, and who Aaron and Moses are actually related to. Now, some of these things are the family's deep, dark secret. No one is supposed to have known it, only those within the family. As far as I can tell, no one ever did figure this thing out except those in the First Temple period knew it. Again, chapter 10 from God's Judgement book. This goes back 12 years. I had a lot in there. It's almost a 500-page book. Decoding the Hebrew Scriptures. This is the volume we're talking about. There's a lot more in this book than what I can cover in a video. You have to understand a lot more proofs and stuff like that, and references. You can't figure any of this stuff out unless you know Moses' 10 code systems. These code systems weren't just used by Moses. They were used by the Greeks, and they were used by the Romans. Finally, Volume 1 on Abraham and Jacob. It explains why Abraham bought the cave. You should see those in sequence. You should see those videos first, because it gives you an idea of what's really going on here and why the family was so bound to this cave and this hill. You'll see them in Series 8, Part 2, and Video Series 6, Parts 1 and 2 is for the code systems. And of course, you should see Part 2 in this Joseph series so you understand Joseph was Sanmut, etc. This you should try to get, watch the videos or buy the book, because unless you understand why this story is so disjointed, and why he had to create the code systems, you're not going to understand this thing. You'll understand why he did what he did, because he had to, he had no choice. He couldn't change any of the letters. Now, a recap of Part 2. This is a young Joseph. I showed 6 or 7 statues of Joseph. Joseph was Sanmut. The previous video and the book proves it. There's irrefutable proof. Joseph was Sanmut, Sanmut was Joseph. He was the boyfriend of our favorite Pharaoh, Hatshepsut, of the 18th dynasty. One of his jobs as a youngster was teaching her child, Nephuri, who was the Pharaoh Tutmosis II's real daughter. She's about 3 or 4 years old here, and he was instructing her when he was first bought as a slave. The Torah gives a good explanation of what he did and what his jobs were. When he finally interpreted her dreams, because of information he got from inside the cave, he didn't know when the drought was going to happen, but once she had her dreams, he knew it was going to start then. That's the importance of it. So the surface story of the Torah basically says that she was Potiphar and Potipharah. It's both her. And explained why in Part 2. So Hatshepsut gave her daughter she had with the Pharaoh to Joseph as his wife. This is like maybe 8 or 10 years after what you see here. So she was in her mid-teens. And gave the daughter she had with Joseph, which was Metri, to the young Tutmosis III, who was maybe 2 or 3 years old at the time. very young marriage. That's beyond a shotgun wedding, don't you think? But yeah, that's what they did. That's what she had done. She swapped babies is what she did. Oh, also, Joseph was a free man. By the time he was even 5 years into it, she freed him when they were actually living as husband and wife. And I think it was a loving relationship. So she freed him. When she finally made him prime minister, he was already a freed man. She's not going to give her daughter to a slave because she'd then be a slave. No. She freed him. He was a free man, which means his 2 sons were free also. I got a response from video 8. This is on Abraham, part 1. And this is what she said. She asked a good question. For millennia, students and scholars and historians and biblical teachers have been confused about their own information. Then along comes you, some guy with an internet connection, and you are the only one to ever have figured out the true understanding of a history. Is that right? And we are all supposed to just believe that's so because you claim it. And then she said, no. Now, normally a guy would wind up leading this, but actually, you deserve an answer. I actually gave an answer in introduction of these videos over a year ago, and also I think in part 1 series on the theory of multidimensional reality. So you deserve it, considering what I'm about to show you, what I have shown you on the Bible, is very sensitive to a lot of people, and I understand that. And so you deserve an explanation. So, Valerie, if you're listening, I've been studying this subject of religion and science for 52 years, since 1967. I'm the first person in history to figure out the model that created the Hebrew alphabet, and the video's there for you to see it. First person in 3,305 years to find the real Abraham's altar, not Solomon's lie. It was never in Jerusalem. And you see it. Actually, I think it was in part 2 of series 8, and you actually saw the real Abraham's altar. First one to figure out Moses' code systems in over 2,600 years, again. It died with the last priest, which was Baruch, the grandson of Jeremiah. And the first one, again, in 2,600 years that found the real Mount Sinai and all the altars that Moses mentions in Exodus and Numbers. That's what makes me different from all the people she mentioned, all these alleged great scholars and great rabbis. Most of them never got off their ass to even go look for Mount Sinai, or even going to Egypt to try to find it. Never did that. They only were bound to the surface story. They didn't know all of Moses' code system. They knew about 3 or 4 of them, tops. And that's only the greatest of the scholars. The rest of them, and that number 12,068, they hadn't had a clue. They had no idea. This is part of my library. This is the Loeb's Classics, Valerie. The red books are in Latin. The left-hand side is Latin, the right-hand side is the English translation. And these are all the Greek volumes. I have about a little less than 180 of those. I have maybe 100 books on Roman, Greek, Jewish, and Egyptian history, at least 100 and something. I have the Journal of Roman Studies from, I actually have them, one of them here, from 1936 to 2008, all inclusive. They even published during the war years. Historical dating of Egyptian history is just basically the archaeologists and theologians rely a lot on the writings of Manetho. But Manetho, there's no original writings of Manetho whatsoever. They're all found within the writings of Flavius Josephus, Plutarch, this is the years, roughly, Diodorus, those are probably insertions by later Romans, Eusebius and Julius Africanus about 264 to 300. Actually, Julius Africanus is mentioned in Eusebius. So, The world knows Manetho only through the writings of this Roman writer and only fragments, unbeknownst to most academic scholars, Valerie, except church scholars. They're the only smart ones, trust me on this. Catholic Church scholars are really good, especially when they get to the level of cardinal, bishop, and certainly we hold pope. That both Flavius Josephus and Plutarch were the pen names of this guy. His real name is Arius Calpurnius Piso. Surprise! Who wrote his works of Manetho between 85 and 110. He died about 116, 117, we think. He's the first one who mentions Manetho because he created him. Got it? He's fictional. Eusebius and Julius Africanus were both descendants of the Pisos and related to Emperor Trajan. Diodorus, mentioned of Manetho in his 34th book, fragmentary, is probably an insertion by the Pisos to make Manetho appear historical rather than hysterical. Now I'll go into the names, why he chose those names, just to rub it in more. Traditional translation of Manetho is Truth of Thor. Isn't that lovely? This also ties out with the creation of Rome, the months of Thor. Piso created his name because it was a combination of two Greek names and words that best describe how he saw himself. It was always about himself. The first was Minos, the great lawgiver of the island of Crete. Piso saw himself as the new Minos. If you remember in one of the books in the New Testament, it says, "This report that all Cretans are liars, this report is true." They're joking about daddy. The second Greek word is theos, which means God or deity. When combined, the two words, they mean the god Minos, so Minos is God, which of course is himself. By the way, notice, this is the same kind of code system that Moses used in the Torah. You'll see more of it. The name Plutarch. Plutarch created the name Plutarch, again, because it was a combination of two Greek words. The Greek god for earthly wealth was Plato, not anything else. I saw a footnote by the translator in the Loeb's Classic saying it was something else. He's wrong. Either that or he was kidding. The Greek word akron means nobleman or master. So together that means the master god Plato, which of course was himself. There's the references for these things, just to rub it in. The name Flavius Josephus. I've heard so many alleged great rabbis and other Bible scholars reference this guy as if he's real. I don't know whether to cry or laugh my head off on their stupidity. It's a combination. You'll have to decide for yourself. It's really a question of how little they really know. Flavius means fine yellow gold. Not kidding on that one. You'll find out why in a second. His Piso is allusion to the fact that he was related to the Flavian emperors of Rome. He was the grandson of Sabinus, who was the brother of Emperor Vespasian, and therefore cousin to Emperor Titus, the guy who destroyed the temple the first time. I mean, the second temple. Yep. He was all related. It was all in the family. That's him. By the way, this is you can tell right off the bat by looking at the statue. It's a Roman statue. It's gorgeous. They did beautiful marble work. Great stuff. And this is a Roman hairdo, Roman style. Only the Romans did statues of themselves. The Greeks did too. It was against Jewish law to make a painting of yourself or a marble statue of yourself. It was a form of idolatry. So if you ever say that this guy's Jewish and he's got a marble statue of himself, you know right off the bat, it's a lie. He's not Jewish at all. The reason why he took Josephus, derivative from the word Joseph, is because he had figured out the same thing I did, which I showed you in the first and second videos, that Joseph was Sanmut and he put away a lot of gold and silver. This guy wanted that gold and silver so he could raise an army and take over and be emperor of Rome, because he was the illegitimate son of Gaius Caligula. His mother, Arria Jr., was taken on her wedding night to Gaius Calpurnius Piso, and he, 24 years old, took this 37-year-old woman and used her good for 30 days, and guess who was born 9 months later? Him. And all the Roman aristocracy knew it, and he knew it, and he wanted that gold to raise an army because he felt he was entitled to become an emperor. That's the truth of it. All the stories about the Hyksos being the Jews and Hebrews, all his lie. Just throw it out and chuck it. By the way, the story is loaded with inner circle numbers and illusions, the 22, the 24, etc. Loaded. So anyway, that's it. The Jewish name, the Egyptian name for the Jews were Peru or Habiru. You got that from the Armana tablets. Here's my recreation of history, as best I can do. The Exodus was 1306 BCE. Tutmosis III takes over from when his father dies. Within a year to 2 years, the Hebrews have become slaves. Aaron's born in 1389, which means he's 83 years old, as Moses tells us, and Moses is 80 years old. This is the sequence of events as best I can figure it out and piece together. This is Tutmosis III. This is his daughter, Joseph's daughter, and this is their offspring. Now, why is his face defaced? Why does someone chop out Amenhotep's face? Now, I know who did it. It was Akhenaten who did it, and I know why. Hatshepsut usurped his power. This is Tutmosis III. For about 22 years, we think. And either 22 or 24 years old, he finally took over as Pharaoh. And I think it's 1492 BCE. He finally was able to overthrow in 1470. Oh, his father's death was 1492. He takes over at 1470 is my best estimate. He was known as the warrior king because he took over like 4 years after the drought, the famine was done with. And Joseph had actually bought Canaan. There was one war that he took part of, and we have the records of it, where at Megiddo. And when you look at what he captured and what was on the other side, it was a token defense at best. Very little was taken in the way of gold and slaves and how many soldiers there were and stuff like that. You could tell they were really spent and they had no money because Joseph took it all. Joseph arranged not only for the Egyptian population to become the property of his girlfriend, the Pharaoh, but also the people in Canaan. They became the Pharaoh's property, all because of Joseph. And on top of it, they had to pay 20% tax on their crops or whatever they made. And that was the tax. I think I mentioned this in the second video. Anyway, this is a deben. This is how they measured gold and silver. It's a unit of weight, and here it's spelled in Egyptian. The squiggly line is an N, so it's deben. Now, this is the funny part about this particular pharaoh. You get an idea how much gold they had gotten from Egypt and the rest of the world and Canaan. Now, this is again, he took over 4 years after the end of the drought, and this is what he's taking. The alleged scholars, the Egyptologists and the others, think that that Hatshepsut and Tutmosis III got the money from the gold mines in Nubia, which is south of them. And the record says they got 9,277 debens of these little weights. That's about 29,600 ounces of gold. There's the reference for it. Now, there's another reference that I think was the same one, that he gave just to the temple at Karnak, the religion of Amun. Over a 3-year period, he gave, well, this is how many debens. I'll just give you ounces because we all think in ounces now. about 2,000 ounces, then 117,000 ounces, 44.2 thousand ounces of gold, just in a 3-year period. This is more than what they claim they got over a 3-year period collectively. Forget it. They got about 3 times more in 1 year. So you know right off the bat, their estimate is totally wrong. One thing you learn in accounting is follow the money trail. That's why I'm wearing my son's money tie. By the way, he even has a $1,000 bill here. We used to have $5,000, $500, $5,000, $5,000, and $10,000 bills until they decided we're all drug dealers and we shouldn't have anything over $100. Anyway, that's about it. I mean, that's how much gold he took in. This is what a silver deben is. It's an Egyptian silver deben. And the mind-boggling 163,000 ounces, or 6.8 tons, was his personal contribution to the temple. God knows what the state took in and what he gave to the temple of Hathor or any place else. That's his personal contribution. There's no evidence that Tutmosis III took revenge on Joseph as Sanmut after he overthrew Hatshepsut. He did deface her statues, some of them whatever he could find, and other monuments and stuff like that, but she had built so many because she had so much money. You could assume that the number you saw here, multiplied by 10 or 20, maybe even 30 times that is what they took in. Maybe even more than that. I mean, it's just personal contribution, 6.8 tons of gold. Pharaoh's relationship with Joseph was more like, I love what you did, but I don't trust you. You know what I mean? But he had no complaints. Joseph made Egypt the richest country in the world, and he was the richest Pharaoh on the planet. Nobody came close. Here's his son, Amenhotep or Menahophes II. This is Joseph's grandson. Make no doubts about it. This is who it is. First clue. After Joseph dies, and this is when Jacob winds up, Jacob dies and the brothers come to him, and this is what they say to him. And his brethren also went unto and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we are thy bondmen. In other words, he did to his 11 tribes, his relatives, what he arranged for with the Egyptian people to be the property of his girlfriend, the Pharaoh. That's what he did. Now, it doesn't say it openly, but it does say in the story that he provided for the other tribes for whatever their needs were to their little ones. So everybody, he supported everybody. What Moses did not tell you until this insertion, that he did the same agreement with his own relatives, his 11 brothers, who he probably wouldn't piss on the best part of them, of what they did to him. He never forgot that. Amenhotep II was Joseph's grandson through Metri, his daughter, his real daughter. At the time of his death, Tutmosis III, I figured this guy had about 1.5 years to 2 years to do the same thing his father did. He had a problem with the vassal kings in Canaan, who was their property, revolting, trying to go back to the good old days when they were in business for themselves. So he had to go quell those riots, and so he wound up having to clean up house. He had to do foreign policy first, then he came home and settled the old score with Joseph's descendants. By then, Joseph was already dead. That's why Moses says, a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. That's true. I think Joseph only lived to about 66 years old, not what Moses tells us. All those dates are contrived dates to add up to other things. It's a code system. It's the difficult one. So what he did was, they knew Joseph had taken a lot of money. They didn't know how much. They had only guesses. But they must have heard stories from the people who came to them to buy stuff, buy grain continuously, and they realized, oh my God, how much did he take? I don't think it was 2/3 as the legend says. He couldn't take away that much. It was so much. It was more like, if it was 1/3, I'd be surprised. But let's say it's 1/3. That's a tremendous amount. So what he did is he seized Joseph's property, which was the 11 tribes. So Joseph's grandson is the guy who enslaved 11 of the tribes. But not Joseph's 2 kids. They were all free. Here is a better sculpture of him, of Amenhotep II. Anyway, he went on his campaigns in Canaan, and he lists a bunch of tribes and what he brought back. This is the one that kind of interested me, 3,600 Apiru. Now, replace the A with an H, and you have the same name that the Egyptians called the Hebrews. Now, somebody in one of the comments on one of the websites said that, on my website, said that there's a river in southern Turkey by the name of Hapiru. It's possible they took the name of their tribe from the river that they were. She may be right. I'll have to look into it. But anyway, it goes on to what he's done. So about 2 years later, he winds up taking and owning all of the 11 tribes. And I don't know how many people were still involved in that, or how many people were involved in that was still alive at that time. Okay, these are 2 important clues. These are clues of the family tree and stuff like that, what happened. The first clue was when Abraham told his wife to say that she was his sister because they were entering the town of Gerar. Surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. Now, this is trying to explain how Joseph covered up where the final location of the gold was. Second clue that Moses gives us, and Isaac dwelt in Gerar. Now, also in Gerar was Esau and Ishmael and their descendants. Ishmael's descendant, Esau. Esau was the brother of Jacob, so it's Joseph's uncle. And the men of that place asked him of his wife, and he said, she is my sister, for the feared to say, my wife, lest the men of this place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. In other words, in 2 places for the story of Isaac and the story of Abraham, he winds up saying very plainly, the men of this place, Gerar, were killers, murderers, killers. Probably for hire too, as you'll find out. So that's really the message you have to take from these 2 quotes. This is what I think happened to Joseph. I'm just going to stand in front of this because I know this thing too well. Here he has Baal-zephon as a waylay station. He had a spent gold mine, which you saw. It was originally maybe 40 or 50 feet long. The Egyptians later, when they followed Moses' trail from the Exodus, found where Joseph had hidden the gold, and they destroyed most of that spent gold mine. So no one could ever do that again. So that's why you saw only a few feet of it, 10 or 15 feet of it. But Joseph basically filled it up with sacks, grain sacks full of gold and silver. Whatever he got paid for the grain, he sold to the rest of the world. So, how does he get the stuff from Baal-zephon to the family burial cave? Well, part of his plot was he had to engineer a way to get his family from the family homestead, Mount Sinai, to back into Egypt so he could have access to the cave and nobody would be there. Well, he did engineer that, and I showed that in the second video, how we did it. And it's also extensively in the book in volume 2. So he wound up, so this is how I think he did it. He's prime minister, and he wound up offering freedom to a bunch of Canaanite slaves, prisoners of war, whatever. And he said, you know, I'll free you, but I have a little job for you to do. I have to have you move some bags of grain into our former home and near the town where I lived to give them food. And maybe he even paid him, who knows. So he had an undetermined number of prisoners that went with him into the interior. It was over 100 miles from there to where he had to go, 110 miles. And he went there. He brought them through the back way. They brought the stuff into not the second cave, not the first cave, but deeper in, the second cave, and piled it up. Probably kept a few bags on the side to give to those in Gerar. So he goes out and then he makes his travels towards the town of Gerar, where guess what the men of Gerar did? They slaughtered all of the Canaanite prisoners, gave some of the bags of gold to basically his uncle. He made this arrangement with his uncle. This was all in the family. Esau was his uncle. And they murdered the prisoners. No big deal there. And you'll see it in some of the legends too in a second. And he went back, and then Joseph goes back to Egypt. How do you like that? Empties the cave out so he could load it up again. We don't know how many trips he did. As prime minister, he could do as many as he wishes. He might have done this during the wintertime when the Pharaoh was up in Luxor, which is south of Cairo, at least 200, 300 miles. And he did all his work down by Tanis, the summer home. Actually, Tanis is basically the summer home of the pharaohs because it was a lot cooler than the desert in Luxor. Anyway, remember, dead men tell no tales. So that's really what happened. That's how it happened. Now, Moses gives us the clues. He may have, but the priests in the First Temple period definitely, who did know the story, they did in fact give the clues in 4 legends. First legend, hence God said, Joseph the devout, boy, that's a joke, shall be one to visit merited punishment on Esau, the unbelieving. Right off the bat, they're connecting Joseph with the demise of Esau and his descendants. Second legend describes a battle between the sons of Esau and Seir. Esau was fighting the town of Seir. In the battle, they took place in the desert of Paran. Paran is one of the 7 coded names this is an area coded for south of Mount Sinai. It was in that neighborhood. The sons of Esau gained a divisive victory. They massacred all the warriors of the sons of Seir, and the Midianites and the children of the east were put to flight. East of the flight, I guess Saudi Arabia. Thereafter, the sons of Esau returned to Seir, and they slew all the inhabitants of the place, men, women, and children, sparing only 50 lads and maidens. This is they may have done that, but this was also done to them. You'll find out by who. Third legend. Now this one, there's a third, and this part of the third should be part of this one. I'll explain why. Third legend takes place when Jacob died and his sons interred him in the cave of Machpelah, which is by Mount Sinai. A battle ensued between Esau and his men and those against the 12 brothers of Jacob and the Egyptians who came to mourn Jacob's passing. Yes, they did. Whether it be, I don't think it was Hatshepsut, because she was already out of power, but I think it was Tutmosis III. What Joseph had done, and the amount of money he brought in, was so massive, he was thrilled with them. So the Egyptians, and Moses talks about it in Genesis, how much they honored him with a whole entourage of Egyptians that went there to the hill to bury him. But the story goes on. 80 of Esau's men were killed, as well as Esau, who lost his head. Now that's That's in the Torah, in Genesis. Now, I'll go on a little further. Third day, well, I'm going to include this one. I think this one really belongs over here. They got a little confused. I'll explain what happened here. Dead men tell no tales. Joseph made his deal with Esau, his uncle, and his relatives, and the people in the town of Gerar. Moses makes it very plain, the men of Gerar were killers. Gave you all the clues. How do you shut him up? What really happened, the Bible story is supposedly Esau claimed, well, I should be buried here too. It's my inheritance also. Now, the real reason I think they were fighting each other was over the money, all that gold. Esau had to have known what was in that cave, maybe even said, yeah, half of it's going to be yours. We don't know what Joseph said to him, but they had a battle by that cave. And those 12 brothers, and certainly the Egyptian army was commanded to basically kill him off and the rest of them. And that's what they did. They killed them all. Third and fourth dreams. On the third day, a large army from Seir and the children of the east marched into Egypt with the purpose of making war upon Joseph and his brethren. Joseph and the Egyptian army almost totally destroyed them. Now, Joseph was alive at this point. So this is probably when he was prime minister still. And I don't think he was prime minister when this happened. So I think this is earlier. And the fourth dream is the same thing. It says there was an invading army, including the sons of Esau, again, that town, Gerar, and he's already supposed to be dead. So the people of Ajin, Ishmaelites, which also was Gerar, and other nations of the east, maybe the Saudis, they set forth on a second campaign against Egypt. Their large army was totally defeated at Ramses. That's an area, not the name of the Pharaoh. That wasn't the Pharaoh then. That was the area, the territory where Goshen was. And Joseph and the Egyptian army. These are desert people. The famine was great. They ran out of money. They wanted to take the grain that was in Sukkot. So they invaded to steal it. And Joseph and the Egyptian army destroyed them. Someplace along the way, he also went into the desert with the Egyptian army, and he finished off everybody in that town of Gerar. They were all dead. The reason I know that, I'm pretty sure of it, because Moses, when he arrives at the base of the hill, never talks about any other people in the area. Nobody. When I was in the Sinai, in Mount Sinai in 1997, with the first expedition, we asked the Bedouins, how long have you people been living here? And they said 130 years. So they got there 1865, around there. But nobody was there. It was empty. It was empty because Joseph and the Egyptian army finished everybody off. They killed them all. Back to my timetable here. Again, this all then makes sense, everything that I've told you here. Battle of Megiddo, Jacob dies, 63. Joseph died, 52. Tutmosis III dies, his son takes over. And within a year, 2 years by, certainly 1436, they become slaves to Amenhotep II, Joseph's grandson. Isn't that lovely? Okay, now the genealogy. Now we get, this is the family's deep, dark secret. Pay attention, all of you. This is really what happened. This is what Moses is basically telling us. He's confessing something here, and you'll see what I mean by the word confessing. Joseph had two sons. Manasseh was the oldest. Ephraim was the younger. Jacob, on his deathbed, blesses Ephraim because his name was closer to Ephron, the Hittite that Abraham bought the cave for. Moses only gives us 2 generations after Ephraim. This guy, who I can't pronounce his name at all, and Ern. Ern is important. On Manasseh, he gives us everybody all the way down to here, equal to Eliashima, which I'll explain who that is. This is the traditional family tree of the Levites. I know the type's a little small. I'll try to go in. Here's Levi. He gives 3 sons, Gershon, Korath, Merariah. And these 2 only had 2 sons and doesn't give anything after that. There's a reason for that. Korath is another story. His oldest is Amram, the father of Aaron and Moses. The only problem with this becomes really obvious. We know when Jacob got into Egypt, we know roughly when Levi was born, about 1526 BCE, in Turkey, Haran. That means, and they supposedly had, when Moses tells us that they were an adult at 20 years old, it's because they had an arranged marriage. The guy would be 20 years old and they'd marry him up with a girl maybe in the teens, early teens, or whenever. And they get married within a year or so without birth control. They didn't have in those days. They had a kid, either a girl or a boy. So you can calculate when this all happened. So Aaron was born 1464, if this was right, which it's not, and Moses was in 1461. That means he would have been 155 years before the Exodus, but we know he was 80 years old because he said he was 80 years old. We know this family tree is wrong. There's another way of proving that it's wrong, by Moses himself telling us. This is the same family tree if it was correct. The 3 brothers, the sister. Exodus 6:20. And Abram took him, Jehoshaphat, his father's sister, to wife, and he bore him Aaron and Moses. Yoshebed, I guess, Yoshebed. Numbers 26:59. In Numbers, this is a difficult book to read. There's a lot of numbers and stuff like that, and most people don't bother focusing on it. And the name of Amram's wife was Yoshebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. Well, they got into Egypt in 1480 BCE. That means she was born 1479. But I adjusted this stuff to, here Moses is 80 years old when the Exodus happened in 1306, and his brother's 83. That's correct. 20 years difference, Amram was born. That means Yoshebed would have been 71 years old when Amram was born. This marriage is not going to last. She's beyond childbirth, no more eggs. She's not given birth to anything. Moses is flat out telling you here, this can't be. This can't be at all. This is totally wrong. That's how he does it. It's very subtle. You have to almost get into his head and his writing what he's doing. But why did he put this, born to Levi in Egypt? If he didn't say anything, and here he didn't say anything. In Numbers, why is he telling us this? Because he's telling you this is impossible. Here's the family tree of the Ephraimites. Ephraim, this guy, and Ern. Now I'm going to give you the clues. Genesis 49:5. This is Jacob on his deathbed. These are not blessings. This is what he basically saw in the future. He used the same thing that Joseph also used to interpret the dreams. There's some device in that cave that can enable you to tell you what the future is going to be. You just may not know when it's going to be. So this is the quote right from the Torah. Let my glory not be united with Simon and Levi. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel, being all the tribes. The only way that happens is one, all the boys are killed, or they don't have any boys, they only have girls, and the girls are married off to the other tribes. Deuteronomy 33:9. This is now Moses when he's doing his swan song, who said unto his father and unto, this is what supposedly his thing about Levi, who said unto his father and to his mother, I have not seen him, neither did he recognize his brothers, nor knew his own children. Moses is flat out saying Levi is not the same person. He's different. He's not there anymore. I don't think anyone picked up on this. Next clue, Exodus 14:4. And the anger of God was kindled against Moses, and he said, this is because, I'll say what happened. He's in the cave, he sees this bush, and he hears a voice coming out of it. And it's a hologram. It's not a real burning bush. Hologram, and he's talking to him. And God is saying to the operating system, is saying to him, I want you to be my spokesman. But Moses says, but I'm of halting speech. He stuttered. Not exactly your best spokesman, you know what I mean? I mean, I don't speak all that well, but he was terrible. So then God gets mad at him. Now you understand why. And then God says, or the operating system says, is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? This is the operating system. He knows Moses only has one brother. So why don't you say, how about Aaron? Or how about, now Moses already knew he was the high priest, or going to be the high priest. He left Egypt when he was 20 years old. So why is he giving two adjectives to his brother? Only needs one, just say his brother's name, or your brother, or whatever. In other words, that bothered me. That was the first clue I had that something's wrong. Levite represented, it changed meaning. It didn't mean the tribe anymore. It didn't exist any longer. They were gone. It represented the priest class. Of course, Aaron was a high priest of Hathor. He's 83. He's the head of the family now, by the way. So the next clue was in the alphabet. You're saying, what is he talking about? Of the 22 letters, 2 letters have no sound values. They are silent, like to be quiet. Ayin, Aleph. This is how you spell Ern. Ayin, Resh, Nun. How do you spell Aaron? Aleph, Hey, Resh, Nun. Ayin and the Aleph can be pronounced the same. The H has no sound. In fact, we don't put an H in Aaron's name. It's just A-A-R-O-N. These are the same names. Old Jewish and obviously Egyptian tradition, you name your new baby after a deceased relative. Okay, Joseph's family tree. Well, let me put it this way. Now you know who Aaron was named after. Aaron, his grandfather. Grandfather died about 56, when he's 56 or 55 years old. The next year, Aaron is born. In the book Numbers, it tells us no less than 5 times that the leader, oh, this is one of the clues. This is so obvious and blatant. You can all judge who knows this stuff better. 5 times the leader of the Ephraimites was Eliashima, the son of Amihud. I should pronounce it right. Moses had 2 sons. Gershom was the oldest. Eliezer was the younger. Gershom, I think, is only mentioned twice in the whole Torah, and Eliezer only once. Now, you think, this is the guy who's writing the surface story. He only mentioned his 2 kids that few times. He mentions Joshua, I think, 24, 25 times. And Aaron, God knows how many. But his own kids only that many times? This is the references of where he mentions it. This phrase, that Eliashima, son of Amihud, is the head of the Ephraimites. Eliashima is another version of Eliezer. It's him. And Amihud is the father. Let's now look at the word Amihud in Hebrew. This is what it's spelled, how it's spelled. It's made up of 3 separate interlinked words. First word, ayin mim, which means beside or near. The second word, yod-he, is short for the unspoken word of God, was yod-he vav-he. For my atheist friends, think of it as the operating system. Third word is several combinations, resulting spellings. First is he vav daled, which means splendor or majesty. Another one was adding a he at the end. You get the word confess, or the last 2 letters may be an abbreviation of this word, which means confession. Both are the same thing. So the end result is beside God, confession, or confessional. Who's the only one who sat in the tabernacle? Wasn't his brother Aaron? He wasn't allowed to. God told Moses, don't let him come in here, I'll kill him. Just like he killed his 2 older sons. The only one who sat in front of the ark and talked to God was Moses. So, one of the code systems Moses uses, if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, therefore A is equal to C. Amihud is Moses. And what is he? An Ephraimite. He's confessing. What is he confessing? He's confessing of what his ancestors did. Not just Joseph. All of them from Ephraim all the way down to his brother never gave up that gold and silver to free the other 11 tribes. That's what he's confessing. Legend. This is one of the legends. This is a high priest who knew the truth also. Eliashima, son of Amihud, the name of the prince of the tribe of Ephraim, points to the history of Joseph, their forefathers. God said, Eliashima, he obeyed me, but Amihud, me he honored, and none other. What do you want, a great invitation? Amihud is Moses. You think I'm wrong? A high priest wrote this. He knows more than you or any of the other professors or rabbis or anybody. They knew, and now you know. So anyone who questions or doubts of how much I know, now you got an idea a little bit. Here's the correct family tree of Joseph through only Ephraim. Ephraim, this guy, Aaron, Korath, his sons, Aaron, Moses. Moses, Eliezer, I just showed you. He's Eliashima, the head of the Ephraimites. His son was Nun, Moses' grandson. Hoshea, a.k.a. Osea, a.k.a. Joshua, born 1309 BCE, the great-grandson of Moses. Now I'll explain what's going on here. Moses' line through Joshua became basically the head of state. He became like king. Aaron's line became the religious head. They owned the religious end of the business and the state end of the business. It's all in the family. Amram married his aunt. Yochebed was the daughter of Aaron, the sister of Korath, and that's who he married. She was married, I estimate, 1417. He was born 1409. She was about 8 years older. No big deal. My grandfather married somebody. His first marriage she was 10 years older than him. Nice Irish woman. Died from TB. From Ephraim down to Aaron, none of them gave up the gold and silver to free the other 11 tribes. That's the Ephraimite deep, dark secret that could never be told openly until now, 2019. Don't you think it's about time I think so. Here's the real line of Levi, of all we really know. 2 sons, both had 2 sons, and after that, gone bye-bye. The story in the Torah about the Pharaoh giving the command to murder the firstborn of Israel, well, I think they gave the order to the Ephraimites, and the Ephraimites decided which tribe was going to get whacked. They had an old score with Levi, because Levi, I'm sure, is the one who gave the order, wanted to go murder Joseph. And what they did is they basically made sure that all the firstborn of these 2 died. That's why no more boys. They had girls, and that was it. And then they disappeared. So those who claim they're Levites, no. Only if they want to say they're priest class. No, they aren't. They're not related to Levi at all. There aren't anymore. They all disappeared, died off. Now we get the philosophical stuff. I'll get on this side. This is a table I had. This is in Moses and 10 code system. This is the 11th code system. This is the philosophical end. How much of our reality is programmed? Are we just in a created reality and this whole thing is programmed? That's the question we all have to answer, or at least ask ourselves. The drop dead date was October 16, 2046. It's explained in video series 7. You should all watch it. Each cycle is 12,068 days or factors thereof. The Exodus was 101.5 cycles back, gives you October then, the Exodus. Aaron's birth, 104 cycles back, May of that. 105.5, Moses' second died, the son took over, and after that, the 11 tribes become slaves. And then 107 cycles back, Joseph becomes prime minister. 1488, July 12th, which makes sense. The flooding in Egypt starts at the summer solstice, June 24th, 25th. And that's when the growing season starts. So his girlfriend, the Pharaoh, Hatshepsut, gives him all the authority immediately, and he starts planting like mad just in the beginning of the growing season. That's where it all made sense. There's more than that. When you see this, the question is, how much free will do we really have? All of this seems to have been programmed by the operating system. All of it. I've run through my head, if Joseph was remotely honest, and didn't have such a colossal ego, he would have, if he told his girlfriend / wife, I want 10% because it's my brains and I figured this thing out and I did all the management. I built storehouses and roads and docks and everything like that to make us filthy rich. She probably would have said yes. What did she care? At that point, there's 2 things. Either he would have engineered his relatives to come to Egypt, and whether he made them slaves or not would have been irrelevant. He wouldn't have had to hide the money. He wouldn't have had to kill anybody off in the town of Gerar. There wouldn't have been an exodus. I think the Hebrews would have just vanished and just become part of the Egyptian population, just like many Jews in the United States just being part of the U.S. population. They just kind of disappear. And the pharaohs would have been filthy rich. Egypt would have been very, very rich. He could have been able to spend the money. He couldn't spend all the money he stole. He couldn't. Couldn't do it. It was all stashed away in the Baal-zephon or in the family burial cave, and he couldn't go there. So, but without the Exodus and the slavery, there wouldn't have been an Exodus. There wouldn't have been Moses. Moses may not have existed then. Either if they stayed in the desert, they may have all died, or Joseph would have supported them. But we wouldn't have had the alphabet. We wouldn't have the Torah. We wouldn't have had the alphabet. Without the alphabet, we wouldn't have advanced as far as we have technologically. Imagine trying to write a journal, scientific paper in hieroglyphics or Sanskrit. Forget it. Anyway, that's the question we have to ask for all of this. I want you to not look at the bark on the tree or the tree. I want you to look at the forest and step further back about the continent. What's really going on? Is this reality we're in entirely programmed? That's the question. I go into it deeper in chapter 11 in God's Day of Judgment book, extensively there, as well as Moses' 10 code systems, not as much. But in the video, you should see it. It's a question we're all going to have to ask ourselves. What's really going on? How much freedom do we really have? Next video is going to be on the Exodus itself. We're going to go through the whole thing, the background history of Moses, what happened with the tribes, and everything else. I won't repeat much that I've done here. This video really brings you into the next in the Exodus and why it had to happen. But you'll see the whole path, where they were on certain dates, and the evidence they left behind, including the Battle of Amalek. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Die-Hole Foundation is a 501c3. We need contributions to do the videos as well as to continue research. Any geologists or geophysicists who want to volunteer time regarding this stuff on the Ice Age of Polyversal, I'd welcome it. Hope you had a good time. I hope you learned something. I hope you're not too freaked out from the stuff about the lineage of Moses and Aaron and what Joseph did.